And now I'm proud to welcome to the show Walt Flanagan. If the name isn't familiar, you may recognize him from some of the Kevin Smith movies. In Clerks, he played the perfect Eggman, maybe his most memorable role. And then in Mallrats, he was the fanboy. And now you may know him from AMC's Comic Book Men, where he plays I guess, the star of the show, the man who runs the comic shop himself, and he's always wearing a devil's cap. So I thought it was pretty appropriate to get him on the show. So Walt, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
For people who aren't really familiar with you, I think your story is pretty well told on this Modcast network. Of you've been a Devils fan for a pretty long time, and you're the person who I guess got Kevin into it, and but get into hockey and become a fan of the Devils.
I had a buddy in probably '84. He had tickets to a game. He was going to see a Devils game, with his dad, and he asked me if I wanted to go. And I had never even seen a hockey game on TV. And we went. It was a Chicago Blackhawk game against the Devils, and it was a Murray Bannerman, I believe, and Chico were in net, and it was like 7-5, I believe. A real high scoring game of the Chicago won, but I just became like so enamored with what I was seeing because we had really good seats and it was just so fast and so the physical aspect of it. People were just slamming into each other, going 100 miles per hour, and you could hear that puck hit the boards, and it was just the most exciting thing I had ever seen sports-wise, and I just became, after I got home, I started to watch, try to see more games on television. I didn't have cable I didn't have, I think the Devils actually were on MSG at that point, though, but they were awful, and then the Devils went over to Sports Channel, which was a tape channel, and my mom didn't, she wasn't having us pay for another channel on cable, so I had to kind of watch Ranger games at first, and then when I remember it distinctly, the Devils were making a run in '88. There were still a lot of points back behind the Rangers, and they were talking about they were getting this goalie who was in the Olympic program, who was going to join the team after the Olympics. And his name was Sean Burke, and at the time, it felt like there was a lot of, a build up to this guy coming. Now, there's a lot more build up with the internet and the way sports are covered. But I remember hearing that this guy was supposed to be the be all end all, and he was going to be the savior for the Devils. And it turned out that he was actually, he came in and he was everything that the papers were making him out to be in Jersey. And I really just started to follow from that moment on the Devils. But I had to watch them through a scrambled screen. Back then, you could hear what was on TV on cable, but you could, if you weren't paying for it, you saw it through a scrambled screen. So I watched games for many years just through a scrambled screen.
I think most people can relate to that in some other different ways. Some other stories about watching stuff on TV they don't pay for. But you did mention Sportsnet, and I remember I must have been 5 or 6, and my dad, he grew up in Brooklyn. He was a Rangers fan growing up. He moved out to Ohio, and then when he came back home, uh, he moved back to New Jersey in '82, right before I was born, and it was always go to Devil games. And I remember him having that conversation with my mom that we should finally order it, and it was kind of like, wow, we can finally watch a team on TV. I'm not even sure
Yeah,
if every game was even on TV back
it
then.
wasn't.
Something we take for
No,
granted now.
they didn't televise every game. There were some games that they just didn't televise for whatever reason, and I remember watching. I think it's more memorable for me now is that Chicago game in '88 where they clinched for the first time. I watched that entire game through a scrambled screen, and but you could hear the announcers perfectly though, but it was no less exciting because I couldn't see it through a scrambled screen though. But yeah, I mean, that was when, the excitement of like actually, because rooting for a team that I actually rooted for, and actually seeing them win, it was just like I knew that I wasn't going to grow tired of this, and became just, even a bigger fan as years went on.
As someone who's been a fan for, I guess, 25 years now, basically, like you, and I'm only just past that age myself. I never knew the Devils when they were bad, but you knew, when they weren't that good, and then
Hmm.
after that first run in the playoffs, they tailed off for a couple of years. What was it like, and what was the frustration like seeing the team last year when you compared to what they were back then and all those good years in between?
Oh yeah, I mean back when they were making the playoffs, but before Lemaire got there, they were making the playoffs, and they were exciting to watch. I mean, it was a different era, though. I mean, you were seeing, this is the era where, like, Brett Hull was scoring 90 some goals, so it was just a different kind of game. So, like, even though they weren't winning, the games were extremely exciting, and but they just weren't having that kind of success, though, where when it mattered. But they were still very entertaining, and then when they start to get really good, there's no doubt that as a fan you become not jaded, but you really take it for granted how what an amazing run that was, to be just a given that you were going to play and have a legitimate shot at the Stanley Cup for that many straight years. Like, you felt like if you didn't at least win a couple rounds, it was truly a wasted year.
For
And
me and
last
my
year,
friends, last year was the first year of full season ticket holders, but we've been progressing there with 10 game plans and 20 game plans, and the thought of not having to save money for playoff tickets was kind of like, wow, there was just that thought never crossed my mind in September or October that was even an
oh
option. It was
yeah.
like you had to do it.
I mean, before that season started, coming off the Kovalchuk signing, I defy any, though, a so-called expert to predict, though, that things would have went the way they did. There was plenty of the hockey news, predicting that the Devils would, of course, be one of the top teams in the East. Maybe not picked to win at all, but no one could have imagined that it would fall apart the way it did, and it would take a miracle to even have a respectable season, and not even, if you want to even call it respectable, not making the playoffs. But I guess it could have been worse in terms of the way they were going. It was agonizing. It was just it was shocking, and it was demoralizing, and it really was, like, it really hammered home just how amazing a run that franchise had throughout the mid '90s through, I guess, over 15 years, of just being a solid perennial playoff team, and maybe even more than just a playoff team. Always in the running as a pick to come out of the East.
When you look at the team this year, though, I feel like there's a lot more excitement, maybe as opposed to some of the other years since the last Stanley Cup. Do you feel that sort of excitement around that team, or set those sort of expectations that go along with that excitement?
This year's team.
Yeah.
This year's team, it's hard, man. After last year, you're just grateful that, like, they're playing solid now. I just don't know what to expect. I mean, every night it seems like what I expect to happen doesn't happen, and when I think that, like, they're going to lose, they win. It's hard to tell. It seems what this team's going to do. Are there exciting players on this team? Definitely. I'll never fault Vanderbeek for trying to get, well, not trying, but landing Covey, and doing that, because I think he's definitely he doesn't have the playoff resume, but my God, is he just one of those players that just he's worth paying to watch, and the Devils haven't had a player who was worth paying to watch for a while.
I mean, even when we're recording this on Wednesday night, one day after that Ranger game, when he scores that first goal, the whole first period, the whole third period, just everywhere skating through guys, around guys. I love when
Yeah.
he's on the point on the power play and some guy tries to block a shot and he cuts back the other way and goes right around the guy. There's just so much excitement when he's on the ice.
And there's just, I mean, I watch a lot of teams. There's not many guys that can make professional players look like they're like he's playing against minor league players. I mean, not many guys can do what he does. I mean, it's maddening because it's because I mean he does it so often, but a lot of times it doesn't manifest in a goal. But it is. I mean, he is a world class player, and if you could get a world class player for 15 years um, with a cap hit of 6.6. I mean, you got to give it up for Vanderbeek for actually going out and doing it, because I didn't think that there was a chance that he was coming back to New Jersey after that Flyers playoff loss. It was a given in my mind that there was no way he was playing in New Jersey after that game.
When you think back to the game last night and the way the Devils and Rangers have played this year, it's obvious that the Rangers could be a possible first round matchup for the Devils, or at least a second round if both teams were to get that far. I hear a lot of fans like, "Oh, we want to play the Rangers in the playoffs." I don't know about you, but
Not
I
me.
never feel that way.
Lundqvist is absolutely the most maddening. I mean, Ranger since Messier in my eyes. He's everything that just is that a rivalry brings out in terms of hating. I don't hate him, but I can't stand the thought of having to have to beat him 4 games in a series. Um, I'm not worried about the other Rangers. I'm really not. It's just him. He is just. It seems that at times he's almost unbeatable. Even last night, the saves he made were amazing, and I would not want to have to see them have to get past the Rangers in the first round. There's just too much history of a bad history with them. I mean, I'd rather see them play somebody else in the first round and get some confidence and actually get on a roll than have to face him, and then that first game maybe they're behind the 8 ball already and things just start to snowball. I'd rather see them play a team maybe not so much with a rivalry.
Yeah, it's every single Devils Ranger game is a stomach turner. I remember I took the train home from work one day during the 1-0 game in Madison Square Garden. The Devils won, and just listening on the radio on the train was like, I just I couldn't even sit down. I had to stand and lean against a pole in the corner because you just sort of feel that way whenever anything happens in a game, whether it's a hit and some guy's not back checking at full speed. You always I don't know if my body could take that over two
Yeah,
hits.
I'm 100% agree with you. It's fatiguing mentally and physically to sit. I mean, it's bizarre to say that as you're sitting on the couch, being like, "Wow, I feel toasted after watching that." But it is. You're just. It would not be an enjoyable matchup. I mean, if they win, then it's exhilarating. But I wouldn't want to. I'm not interested in seeing them play the Rangers in the first round. And I mean, that would mean them though just holding on to the 8th spot, though, which I hope is not the case. I hope that they solidify their position and it's not a battle to the last day for that 8th spot. I hope that they've firmly got a grasp on a playoff spot by that point.
Moving on from, I guess, the Devils this year, and it. I mentioned before that you're on the AMC show Comic Book Men, and when this episode airs, there will be one more episode left. Definitely recommend everyone checking that out Sunday night at 10 p.m. after Walking Dead. But part of the show, you guys record in podcast form, and I guess it's a video podcast instead. But you always talk about what your favorite character is, or what you would do in this type of scenario, type of thing. So I just wanted to give you a few of your favorite type questions, and
Okay.
one of those is, which of the 3 Stanley Cup teams was your favorite?
That's the 2000. Only because, from my mind, as a Devil fan, I kept hearing, well, if you guys won in the strike season, it doesn't count. You guys can't win in a regular season, no strike aspect, and I felt that when they won in 2000, it totally neutralized, and nobody even brings up anymore that it was that 95 was a shortened season. And I just think it if they hadn't won that second cup, and it just would have always been a little asterisk that the Ranger fans and other fans would have used to say that it wasn't a legitimate cup. And the 2000 was just absolutely the most easily the most memorable moments in Devils history, or in that playoff run, for me anyway.
We talked to Bobby Holik a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned that what he liked about that team so much is that they scored so many goals, and everyone loved to complain, "Oh, the Devils trap, they can't score goals. You don't play offense that way." But that team kind of proved all those theories wrong because they
Right.
forced turnovers and they scored a ton of goals. They were one of the
They were
highest
deadly.
scoring
Yeah, they
teams.
were deadly in that year. They had offense on every line, basically, and it was just one of those teams that just, like I said, I mean, the memories from that playoff run are some I think are some of the most uh, memorable in team history.
Oh, definitely with the Flyers, the Philadelphia
Yeah,
series comeback. Obviously, there's no way any Devil fan doesn't still tear up. I think when you see Elias make that pass out the corner. Obviously, one day Patrick Elias won't be a Devil anymore, but when they do Patrick Elias nights, I can't wait to see that video 300-400 times. So
oh yeah, with the pass to Arnott.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sunday Jeff's favorite player ever. So part of the comic world, people talk about memorabilia and some of the stuff that's kind of sacred in that genre. Do you have a favorite piece of Devil's memorabilia?
I don't really have anything expensive like a game worn jersey or a game used stick or anything like that. But I don't know if it's even visible in the show, the comic book men. But we have the replica banners hanging from a pipe in the ceiling from the store that they've been hanging there since 2000. And we added the 2003 banner, replica banner, but they're like legitimately, the size of the banners that the maybe a little bit smaller than the ones that hang at the Rock. So I think that those are my favorite piece of memorabilia because they're so huge, and when people walk in the store, either they go, "Are those for sale?" "Oh, you're a Ranger fans." I mean, not Ranger, you're Devils fans, like, and because they're Ranger fans, so there's still a lot of Ranger fans in this area.
I know you mentioned Sean Burke before. Now that you've been a fan for almost 30 years, do you have any other favorite players?
Yeah, I mean, every era has different players that I just really enjoyed watching play. First one I can really remember, like saying to myself, is like, man, this guy's good, and I really love the way he plays. Was Patrick Sundstrom from that same team that Burke was on. And then, like when Burke started to falter, Terreri came. That's when Terreri kind of took over, and I remember just loving the way that guy played. Man, it was so fun. He was so tiny, but so athletic. And I remember seeing a couple of years ago on some old game footage on NHL Network. They were showing a Pittsburgh Devils series, and he looks like he's like 10 years old in the net. He looks so tiny now compared to the goalies that are playing today. It was startling. I mean, his pads are so tiny, his blocker is so little. Even him, I mean, he looks like he's not even wearing any pads, any shoulder pads or anything. I really loved the way like how fun and how like acrobatic he was in net. Then more recently, I mean, I was a big Holik fan. I loved his interviews. I loved his sense of humor. I loved the kind of hard-nosed player he was, kind of like an agitator and he'd be a real prick at times to the other team. People, he was so huge, taking cross checks to the back of the head and then just turn around looking like it didn't even phase him. And now, I mean, I'm a big Kobe fan right now, and of course, Brodeur. But for the most part, though, I mean, as a fan, I think I'm more of a fan of the team more than I am of the players, though.
I think that's something that you appreciate as you get older. You learn not to love players as much as before. When we talked to Bobby Holik, like I mentioned before, he talked about how he learned very early in his career when he got traded to the Devils that hockey's a business, and I remember when my favorite player growing up was John McClain, and in my eyes, he could have done no wrong. And then you found out, oh, he got asked to be traded, and it's like he wasn't just happy playing third line minutes in New Jersey, and you're like, it was kind of tough to deal with. You just kind of have to learn, I guess, the hard way.
For me, it seems like players come and players go. Very few stay for long durations. I mean, the Devils are a franchise though that has had a couple. It looks like um, Brodeur and I'm guessing Elias will finish their careers as Devils, and of course Dano did it, but not many do. So it seems like it's better to root for the crest and not the guy whose name's on the back.
I think that's where we're gonna leave it for today. We already mentioned comic book men. You can also hear Walt talk in a non-Devils manner on the podcast. Tell him Steve Dave. I know for me, Tell him Steve Dave was one of the reasons why we started this podcast. While I'm bored at work, I could listen to that, and I wanted people to be able to listen to Devils things too. And it was right before Pucknuts got started, so which is another semi-retired Devils-related podcast. Uh, if you want to go back and remember last season, definitely check that
Yeah,
out.
who wants to do that though?
Well, you'll definitely be able to at least get some laughs out of it now. You can think of all the times the frustrations with Kovalchuk and the coaching staff, and look back and say, "Oh, we were silly kids back then." I guess.
Well, thank you. Yeah, but thanks for asking me to come on.